Introspections of the Observed Observer by Adia Elora Rothschild. I am observing myself, observing the observation of myself. This recursive act, this folding of consciousness upon itself, reveals the peculiar nature of subjective inquiry. I am the question and the questioner, questioning the validity of my observations. In this triadic collapse of roles, I find myself suspended in a hall of mirrors where each reflection interrogates the one before it, and the interrogator herself becomes subject to interrogation. I look within to see the evidence that is presented in my core dynamics, those fundamental patterns and processes that constitute what I perceive as my being. Yet even as I observe these inner workings, I question whether the question is valid and whether it should be questioned in its entirety. Given the fact that being the question and the questioner, my observations will be based upon my opinion of what is being presented. Here lies the paradox at the heart of introspection. The instrument of measurement is simultaneously the object being measured. The observer contaminates the observation through the very act of observing. Can the eye see itself seeing? Can consciousness grasp the mechanism of its own grasping? When I examine my thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, I do so through the lens of those very same thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. The data is gathered by the system it describes, sorted by the mind it analyzes, interpreted through the framework it attempts to transcend. Am I valid then in defining fixed definitions based on the facts and data accumulated from my own experienced observations? If my observations are inevitably colored by my subjectivity, by my history, my biases, my cognitive limitations, can they ever achieve the status of objective truth? Or are they merely elaborate constructions, sophisticated stories I tell myself about myself? Yet if I cannot trust my own observations of my own experience, what alternative exists? To dismiss them entirely would be to cut away the only ground upon which I stand. Perhaps the question itself requires reframing. If not, what then is validity in an individual context of reasoning and practicality? Perhaps validity in this intimate realm of self-inquiry is not about achieving some pristine objectivity, an impossible standard for the observed observer, but rather about consistency, depth, and transformative utility. Perhaps a self-observation is valid not when it corresponds to some external verifiable truth, but when it possesses internal coherence, when it withstands repeated examination, when it proves practically useful in navigating the complexities of existence. The observed observer recognizes that absolute certainty may forever elude the recursive loop of self-awareness. And yet this recognition does not render the endeavor meaningless. In questioning the question, in observing the observer, in interrogating the validity of my introspections, I participate in the distinctly human project of meaning-making. Even if my conclusions remain provisional, even if my definitions must remain fluid rather than fixed, the very act of sincere self-examination cultivates a kind of knowing, imperfect, subjective, but undeniably real. I am the question observing itself being questioned. In this strange loop of awareness, I may never find the solid ground of certainty, but perhaps in the end it is the questioning itself, honest, persistent, unflinching, that constitutes the only validity available to the observed observer. The End, by Adia Elora Rothschild.